third season of the Now Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser podcast. We changed things up a bit with a name change, and the podcast is full of diverse guests who have fascinating stories of how they are leading their own lives, taking risks, serving others, and loving the lives they lead. They will share how they lead their own lit-up lives, how they achieved inner peace and joy, and the work they did to get there, and continue to do to stay there. Join Debbie this season as she digs in, shares how she started and continues to love herself, love those around her, and love the work she feels called to do. This season, you will hear some real and deep areas of Debbie's life as she shares the work she has done and continues to do to lead her own life in the hopes that through her experiences, you might be able to move into a more lit up life yourself. Listen in as she shares experiences, stories, and tools to help you. Now let's get started.
Hello there, and welcome back to this episode of Lead Your Life. My name is Debbie Heiser. I'm owner and CEO of Three Vines Consulting and Leadership Development and the creator of Lead Your Life. And it's really not just Lead Your Life, but Lead Your Lit Up Life. And so what I've been doing is a series of podcasts around these 12 guiding principles that I've learned from a group here in Sandpoint called Responsible Living, and that I want to share with you because they've made such a huge impact in my life and are a big reason that I today feel like I'm leading a lit up life. It doesn't mean that there's not bad things that happen or that there's not days that I'm sad, and we'll get to some of that. But the first two, for those of you that didn't have an opportunity to listen to the previous podcast, is that I will be 100% responsible for myself and to others 100% of the time. Go back and listen to the podcast to hear more about that. And the second one is I will have fun, and it's important to play. So again, listen to the previous podcast for that. So today, we're really going to look at the next two, which is principle 3 and 4. And principle 3 is I will not ask why. Why is only important for learning concepts. And this one for me has been a little bit of a nuance and helpful because I spend a lot of time in my head justifying, coming up with the whys, being logical about why I'm behaving a certain way or why someone might be doing something the way that they're doing it. Now, if I'm genuinely seeking to understand something, the why is okay. But if I'm questioning, well, let me back up. When you look at the why, if your why question changes the outcome, then you're looking at something to understand it. If not, then it's to keep you stuck. So a good example of this, and it's kind of a blatant example, so then I'll talk about some subtleties, is that if I have something happen to me, instead of saying, why me? I can say, why not me? What am I needing to learn from this? That's different. That's a different kind of why than questioning a logic behind it. So again, to learn a concept, why is important. But really, if you want to become aware, look at and think about as you are going about your day, how many times do I ask why? Now, it reminds me of a little kid, right? Where there's this period of time, I think with Zach, it might have been like the age of 2 to 3, maybe 3 to 4. I don't remember, but somewhere around that time. He is 29 now, so that's a little ways away. But so when I think back, these little people are trying to learn so much about their world. So they're constantly saying, why? And sometimes parents would get frustrated with that, but it's important to acknowledge that they're learning. And so that's a really good actually tip, even as a parent, that even when you feel the frustration and don't want to answer the question, when we provide frustration back to our little girls and our little boys, our little people in our lives, it gives them a message that it's not okay to ask why. And so just a little thought there. And so kind of that same thing, if we think about that, we each have a little girl or a little boy inside of us that is our heart, and we're constantly questioning why I'm feeling a certain way. So the little girl in me, why is that little girl feeling sad? Why is that little girl feeling excited? then that creates a disintegration of trust. And so it's really important that, when you say, why am I sad? It's okay to look at why you're sad, but it's also really okay to let your heart feel that for a bit. So again, if you're learning a concept, if I'm asking a why out of curiosity to learn and understand so that I can make changes, that's different than getting stuck in the why me, why does this have to happen? And really it's the victim game. We end up as the victim. And many of us are kind of going to stand up and say, oh, we don't play in the victim game, but it's really interesting how sly that victim game or drama triangle really works. And how quickly you can even do it in your head. So we'll talk more about that in a different episode, but just be really aware of when you might ask why and the intention behind the why. So is it out of curiosity to create awareness, or is it being critical or judgmental of yourself? Like, why didn't I get up at the time that I thought I was going to get up? Or why did I stick that piece of chocolate in my mouth? Or why did I not go out and exercise? Those are the kinds of whys that I'm talking about that are more destructive. So hopefully that makes sense. This is one that continues to be something I work on because I'm constantly in my head. And again, it's okay for learning concepts, but I'm also my worst critic, which a lot of people I know are. So just think about that. I just suggest to you to try that on for size. Guiding principle number 4 is I will stay current with my feelings: mad, sad, glad, and afraid. Now, I will tell you, I remember distinctly a call out to my good friends in Kansas City, my girlfriends, and we went to go see The Notebook. And many of you listening to this have probably seen it. If you haven't, it's a great film and it's a tearjerker. And I have always been someone that it's not that I don't want to have the ability to cry, but I'm not one that easily sheds a tear. And so what I found is it was really cute, actually. We were at the movie and my good friend Dawn is sitting next to me. My good friend Kelly, Elizabeth's there. If I'm forgetting someone, I'm sorry, I'm not meaning to, but we were sitting there and I hear a little sniffle on my right side. And Elizabeth's over there sniffling a little bit. And Dawn is sobbing through the ending of this movie, just sobbing. And the credits come on, the lights come on, and she's still crying. And she looks at me and she said, it's just so cute. And this is what made me cry. She was talking about her husband and she is like, John would do the same for me. And so I started to tear up because I thought that was just so sweet. But I struggle with emotion. I have struggled. I'm going to change that verbiage. I have struggled with emotion in the past. And part of that is because my little girl had been so afraid to come up and feel these emotions, right? And somewhere in my life, I learned that I needed to be perfect, to be worthy. I've learned different interpretation. My subconscious interpreted some things very differently than what the intention was. And I've had to unwind that. Part of my feelings is it was much easier to not feel anything because I knew psychologically and logically, I knew that if I felt joy, I was going to have to feel the pain as well. And through my life, there have been some things that have happened to me that were painful. And it has taken me a while to get to that point. There were some things in my life, and I can go into some details, but I don't necessarily think that it's always the most helpful to go down that road, unless it's going to help other people. But some sexual abuse when I was young, feeling like I had to be perfect. And again, my parents were phenomenal parents. I feel very blessed that I have the family and the parents that I've had. And my heart breaks for people that don't have love in their life. And these are just messages that I picked up. And throughout my life, whenever we moved a lot through middle school for me, so from 5th grade up until I was in high school. We moved. I left this like great group of friends, which I have to say it's been fun because I've reconnected with some of them on Facebook recently. But from elementary school that we used to hang out with all the time, the Voorheeses, the Nankies, like it's been so fun to reconnect with them. But I left this like group of people when I was in 5th grade, and I thought my life was ending. And so then we moved to Denver, Colorado. We were there for a year and I met some people there. Then we moved to Chicago, Illinois, and a suburb there, Elgin. And I met a great group of people there. And then we moved to Platte City, Missouri. And we were there all through my high school years. Excuse me. And then that's where my ex-husband and I met, and then ultimately raised our son. And he went all the way through grade school and high school there. And what was pivotal though for me is that part of this around staying current with your feelings is I learned to shut off those feelings and shut off connection with people. I would tell people, so I'm going to put my hand up here. I don't know how that's going to work on the video, but I would tell people all these things about myself because it kept them at a distance. So I told people what I wanted them to know, and people felt like they really knew me, but there was a very few, maybe 1 or 2 people at the most, that really knew the inner workings, that really knew who I was. And in some cases, I didn't know who I was. And so that was something that I did to help keep people at bay, that connection. And when I've lost connection, I've lost the ability sometimes to really step into feeling mad or sad or glad or afraid. My family too is not a super emotional family. We are, and I'm talking my extended family too. We're really big on finding the silver lining, which I'm so grateful for. It's that level of gratitude and looking for the joy in things. But I did learn, I didn't learn, well, let me back up. I didn't learn how to process mad. So I'll never forget the first time I was sitting in actually Jeannie's house, I think it was. And it was a group of people. It might have been a 3-day retreat that I went to. And we were talking, and I started to get angry. And I was laughing while I was explaining what I was mad about. And they pointed out to me that my little girl was really confused because I didn't know how to process anger. I didn't know how to do that in a healthy way. And I had either seen unhealthy ways of expressing anger or had not seen it at all. And so I've worked through and figured out how to deal with being mad, right? And anger is scary sometimes. And I've done things, people laugh at me, but I've cut wood. I've written things on rocks and thrown them into the water. And it's important to like scream or say these things out loud and get it out of your body. Some of you are going to think I'm nuts when I say this, but it is so freeing. And many of you are going to say, I'm not angry, I'm not mad, but I would ask you to really take a look at your nonverbals. A lot of times if people are angry or frustrated, even their foot will move or your hands might be fisted while you're talking and you don't even realize it. And the more and more we stamp down that mad or that anger, the frustration, the more and more it eats at us. And the more and more energy it takes, it's important to get that out. Do it with a trusted friend. You're not gonna, I don't go do this at City Beach. Like I go somewhere where it's private, and I usually have my good friend Kathy or my good friend Barb with me, and I work through it. And it's good to do that. The other thing is sad. It's okay to be sad. So many times too, there's an awesome video that Brene Brown does about empathy that I highly recommend. If you haven't seen it, go out and just Google empathy Brene Brown video. It's like 8 minutes, if that. And really, when a person is sad, and I know when I'm sad, I don't want someone to fix it for me. I want them to witness and allow me to work through the sad. And being sad is a normal emotion. There are no good or bad emotions. This is a normal emotion. And being sad is okay. I allow myself to be sad when I'm sad, but then I also know, mainly due to the faith that I have, that there's hope. And it's important to work through that sad and work through it with someone. We're not meant to be alone. And aloneness and isolation can lead to more anger and more sadness. And then I want to talk about the third, actually the last one, which is afraid. There's a lot of times that there's some fear. Now I'm going to fess up. I see a snake and that is an immediate body reaction. That is a fear. I understand that the snakes are good for certain things. I don't like them and it just creeps me out. I get shivers even talking about it. That's a different kind of fear. And I've been facing a lot of fears. I was afraid of heights. Every time I go hike and I'm up higher or I go across a bridge, every time I do something to face that fear, the less power that fear has over me. And really there's kind of two ways to look at life. You can look at life through fear, the lens of fear, or you can look at life through the lens of love. And I choose love 9 times out of 10, right? I'm not perfect and I don't ever claim to be. But I try really hard to do that. But that doesn't mean I don't have fears. I have a huge trust in, for me, the Trinity, God, Christ, and the Holy Spirit. I don't have a lot of worry or fears about things happening to those that I love. I pray that nothing ever happens to them, but I don't dwell in that or sit in that. That makes me anxious if I think about those things. And I don't want to give energy to that emotion or that anxiety. I don't want to give energy to anxiety. That's fear-based. But there are fears. When I stepped out and quit my job and didn't have a paycheck anymore and stepped into what I feel called to do, there was only me and I was responsible for myself. And, there's a little fear sometimes of, am I really going to be able to do this? And then I kind of look at that and say, what's the message? Where is that? And sometimes it goes back to that perfectionism piece. So catch yourself when you're feeling fear. What's the fear really about? A lot of times for me, and I know a lot of you that know me find this hard to believe, I'm being sarcastic, but that a lot of times my fear has to deal with control. And I'm learning to let go and learning to surrender more and be open to receiving versus trying to control everything. Controlling everything really out of a sense of fear is exhausting. And I'm realizing it goes back to guiding principle 1, that I'm 100% responsible for myself and to others and not for others. And lastly, I want to talk about glad, because I mentioned earlier that it was easier for me to shut off all emotion. And so, because I didn't want to feel the sad, so I also shut off the joy and the glad. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there were times that I was happy, but I have this just the soul filling joy now that comes in life. And again, there's things that make me sad. There's things that make me angry. There's things that sometimes I'm afraid of. But I have this joy and I'm learning to be more present in the world versus, there's a saying that if you look back and live in the past, that's depression. If you live in the future, that creates anxiety. And so really trying to be present, whether that's with people that I'm with, like hanging out with, which I mentioned in an earlier podcast. I wasn't my best self when I was with my sister, Amanda. I was tired and my body was physically worn out. And so it's important to take care of ourselves in order to do that. Anyway, I kind of got off on a tangent there, but really it's about making sure when it says I will stay current with my feelings, mad, sad, glad, and afraid, it's really important too to stay in congruency. I know my best friend Barb called me out on this, that there was a time when, Brent and I were struggling, and she said, I gotta ask you this. She said, when you guys are fighting and you say, I'm fine, if he asks, are you upset about something? And you say, no, I'm fine, you're lying, because you are upset, but you just don't want to step into it. And it's okay to say, yes, I'm upset, but I can't talk about it right this minute. I'll get back to you in an hour. But it's important to go back and talk about it. But that was such a wake-up call for me, that I wasn't being relevant with my feelings. I was making myself small and making myself like keep those emotions really close versus being open and honest about it. And that disintegrates relationship. When a person's not sure that the other person's being honest about how they feel, it makes it harder to trust in the future that you're going to get honesty. This one is a hard one, something that we'll maybe talk about in a future podcast, because I could go on and on about this one. And I practice now with other people. Like when people come to visit me, I will say to them, I'm going to trust that you're going to let me know if you need something. And I would ask that if you need something, that please ask me, because I can't read your mind. That starts to build that trust right away. You know, we live in a world where we've been told that if we have a desire or a want, not to voice it. And to me, that's when I start to fall into the victim game, because then I become the rescuer. And so then I'm not staying current with my feelings. I'm not expressing that I'm really glad to see somebody, because, or I'm sad about something because I'm afraid I'm going to upset them, when in fact the vibrational energy is already there. And it's much better to come clean with that and talk about it, versus letting that potentially create a chasm between a relationship. Okay, so I've kind of gone all over the place with this. I will stay current with my feelings: mad, sad, glad, and afraid. But it is something that we could probably have 4 or 5 podcasts on this one. But something I would suggest to you to think about is, are there some feelings that I talked about in those 4 categories, mad, sad, glad, and afraid, that you are comfortable with? And then also the opposite of that. Which ones are you uncomfortable with? What did you learn as a child growing up about these emotions? And then when you have an intense emotion, try to pause and think about where it shows up in your body, because our bodies will have physical responses to these emotions. And even Oprah says your issues are in your tissues. There's a lot of work around this. The Body Keeps the Score is a great book about it. And so just notice even in your body things that are happening. So with that, I know that this one is pretty packed with information, and I would love to have more of a conversation with you about any of these. So please feel free to reach out to me at www, and this is all spelled out, 3THREE, V as in Victor, consulting.com. And very shortly, it will be leadyourlituplife.com. And I really look forward to chatting with you. If you have any questions about any of these guiding principles, please reach out via the website or via Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn. Would love to hear from you. And everyone, make it a fantastic day. Thanks so much.